Hi, I'm Michael Rosenbaum, and welcome to my podcast, Path to Enlightenment. This podcast is designed to share with you how to successfully navigate the spiritual path by taking deep and often mysterious spiritual concepts and expanding them in a way that I hope is understandable and, more importantly, inspirational. In addition, my intention is to guide you to have your own spiritual experiences so that you can truly know what I'm talking about and embrace it in your own way. That is the way I've learned things, and I find that the most important thing. So today's subject is, what is Christ consciousness and how can I achieve it? So I want to start off with the idea that when I talk with many people, they often interchange the idea of Jesus and Christ as the same thing. They refer to Jesus as Jesus, they refer to Jesus as Christ, as if it was the same idea or the same person. So I have a different point of view about that. Jesus was a person who incarnated on this planet, an amazing being, an avatar. I can't say enough about his wisdom, his energy, his light, everything I've read that he said, and so on. Wonderful. And in his journey here on earth, he developed and he reached Christ consciousness. So Christ consciousness is a level of consciousness. It's not a person. Just like if you think of Buddha, another really famous being that incarnated on the planet, and he incarnated as Siddhartha, and he was a prince, and then he decided to kind of renounce his princehood, went out into the world and had experiences, and then he famously meditated under a Bodhi tree, and for some huge amount of time, and as a result of that, he reached what he called an enlightenment state, a clean, open place, a different perception. That perception is referred to as Buddha mind. So Buddha isn't a person either. It's a level of consciousness. So Christ consciousness is an amazing level of consciousness. Sometimes I know in religion and in the Christian religion, at least I've heard it said to me that in order to reach God, whatever their conception of God is, you have to go through Jesus to reach God. Now, that always sounded um, a little suspect to me. I can't even imagine that Jesus would have said that. But there are so many other different religions and people. Would it be possible that you have to follow this particular person's point of view in order to reach God? But I think what they were really saying, and it kind of got misinterpreted, was you have to reach Christ consciousness in order to move through that portal into God consciousness. So Christ consciousness is a level of consciousness. Jesus is not the only person that ever reached Christ consciousness. And in fact, I think Jesus is famous in saying that whatever I've been able to accomplish, whatever I've done, you can do also and more. So maybe to me, saying the ability to reach Christ consciousness is open to everybody. And you can do that too, and even do more with it than what I did with it. So, that being said, how does one experience or attain Christ consciousness? Well, that's a really big question. So I'll share a little bit about what I've learned and what I know in my own personal experience. So, one of my favorite spiritual teachers is an Indian teacher whose name is Yogananda, and he came from India in 1920 into the to the U.S. and he was here till the mid 50s when he passed on. And he was sent here by his teacher, or in India they call them gurus. That means his spiritual teacher. And purpose was for him to kind of try to bring East and West together, bring that thinking together. Because in the East, they were really strong suit was developing their spiritual consciousness, and they were big meditators. In the West, well, we were really good at creating things in terms of physical things and science and making things happen and discovering things and so on. And light on the meditation side and the spiritual side. And in the East, they were kind of light on the um, building and creating a sustainable society from a physical standpoint. So felt like these two needed to come together, and he was going to bring his spiritual teachings to the West. And also, it's interesting to note that the in the Hindu religion, as Jesus, the Christ, is considered the head of the Christian religion here. In the Hindu religion, it's Krishna. And Krishna was also a prince who lived, and he attained this higher level of consciousness. What's interesting is that the name is very similar. Christ and Krishna, a same alliteration, I think pointing to the same thing. So Yogananda and his teachers were saying, well, Krishna consciousness and Christ consciousness are the same thing. Come to the West and maybe you can demonstrate that or show that and create processes that people from the West can use to reach Christ consciousness. And so he has a whole society called Self-Realization Fellowship based in California, and he has a whole group of lessons and his whole meditation processes and different ways of living to attain Christ consciousness. So he has a whole plan and way of doing it. I've read them. I'm kind of a devotee of his. I like that work, and I use it and I find it helpful. But I want to quote something that he said about Christ consciousness because I think it's relevant to this podcast and for you to know. So I'm just going to read it. He said that Christ consciousness is the universal divine intelligence or omnipresence of God manifesting in creation. So again, he's talking about a consciousness, divine intelligence of God manifesting in creation in physical form. He says, exemplified by Jesus and attainable by only through deep meditation and yoga. So, according to Yogananda, the way to get there is deep meditation and yoga practices. He goes on to say to realize oneness with the infinite love and joy of the Father within. So, Christ was certainly a good example of that love. He emanated love like nobody else. And also, he was famous for saying, I and the Father are one. So he was communicating that oneness with the infinite love and joy of the Father within. And Christ was very big about talking on finding God within. Remember, Christ was Jewish and he did not like temples. He thought you should build your own temple inside of yourself and connect with God. You did not need a temple uh, head, rabbi or Sanhedrin or whatever it was in those days, to go ahead and talk to God for you, that you could do it yourself. And that was one of the things that really kind of angered him, or he didn't like that people would pay money to the temples, the Jewish temples, so they could contact God for them. He thought that was very misplaced. You should do it yourself. That's what he taught. And Yogananda goes on to say it's not just Jesus's human form, but the divine consciousness he embodied, Christ consciousness, which can be experienced by expanding one's awareness to feel the cosmic love and unity pervading all beings in nature, achieving the I and Father are one state. So Yogananda was pointing to the fact of Christ consciousness, of achieving Christ consciousness. And he said the best way to achieve that, as far as he was concerned, was deep meditation and yoga practices. Now, I always find it interesting that anytime I've either attended temples, I happen to be Jewish, attended temples when I was younger, or even when I was an adult, or attended church services for funerals or weddings or other things that I was invited to, um, I noticed that there was very little meditation going on. But Jesus was a master meditator. They have stories of him going out to the desert for, I don't know, 20 days and meditating. He'd go up on the mountain and meditate all night. He was a master meditator. There's also information that's come out that the years between when Jesus was a teenager until he was in his, I guess, early 30s, there was a gap in information. The Bible doesn't talk about what he was doing, but apparently he traveled to the East and he studied with a bunch of yogis and learned lots of different processes. And in the East, they have documentation of him going there and learning things and being taught by the rishis and so on. So it would make sense that yoga would be part of what he was teaching, although he taught it in his own way. So, how does one experience Christ consciousness, meditation, and yoga? So, yoga is also a misunderstood thing in the West here. So when I was younger, I studied yoga in terms of going to yoga classes, and I did the different postures. They're called asanas, and I thought that was yoga. And also at the end of a yoga class, there was usually a meditation, which was maybe about 5 minutes. So you did a 30 or 45-minute yoga class doing all these postures, and then you did maybe 5, 10 minutes, if you're lucky, of meditation. However, the asanas is just one aspect. And the person who created yoga in the East, his name was Pantajali, and he had an eightfold path. He had 8 steps for yoga, and yoga being the science of uh, connecting with God consciousness. The word yoga, means oneness. So he had an eightfold path on how to get there. So let me read you the different parts, right? Because these are things to aspire to. So he has one of the ones called Yama. Yama is ethical principles to live by, kind of like the Ten Commandments in a way. Um, Things to be that allow you to be the best person you can be and not harm anybody else and help others. The second one is niyama, which is self-discipline, um, things to do to create purity, maybe fasting, uh, certain dietary things or ways to eat or be, and certain studies to do to understand more deeply. The third path, third step are the asanas. Those are the physical postures. Now, if you've ever done yoga, one of the beautiful things I find about yoga is that my body feels great at the end of it. It's like you exercise, you put blood flow and energy vibration to all parts of your body, and your body's just kind of humming. But the purpose of the asana is so that you could meditate more deeply because your body is now whole and buzzing and feeling complete. So the asanas serve a great purpose, but it's just really a beginning so you can have a deeper meditation. The next step he talks about is called pranayama. That's breath control techniques. In the East, there's a lot of information about different ways of breathing, and breathing brings in life force, and life force flows through your system and into your energy chakras. The energy chakras, as most of you probably know, are energy centers in the body. And it's the energy centers that absorb the life force from the universal energy field. And if you have your energy centers open, then you can experience more life force and you can have a different perception. And one of the first things I ever studied when I got into this field, oh God, I'm dating myself here, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, was energy healing with a woman called Barbara Brennan. And it was a 4-year intensive course. And she taught all about the energy chakras, the different levels of them, and how to work with them and how to open them up. And the energy chakras, the center of them is in the spine. So the spinal cord and the energy in the spine is a very important part of opening up your connection to spirituality. And in fact, Yogananda, way he talks about it, he says, paraphrasing here, that when we're first born, the very first thing that's created in the womb is the brain, the medulla oblongata in the back of the brain, and then the spine, and the spinal cord. And so, in his idea, is that your soul's energy goes into that part of your brain and down your spinal cord, and then that builds out the rest of your body. And that's what creates the senses and your ability to experience the outer world. But if you want to experience the spiritual world, you have to reverse that and turn off what he calls the five sense telephones, the outer senses, and put it back in the spine and really magnetize the energy of the spine in some of his meditations designed to do that so that you can move out the medulla oblongata, which is connected to your third eye, back into spiritual consciousness so you can achieve Christ consciousness. So breathing techniques are really important. He has his own that he teaches. The next step on this path is called um, dharana or concentration. So that means to concentrate on, uh, be able to concentrate in like a one-pointed focus. And when you do that, then all your extraneous thoughts begin to dissolve. And so like a laser light, you can be focused. I think I skipped one here, which was pratahara, withdrawal of the senses from external objects. So I mentioned that in the other thing. And then the next thing is called dhyana, which is meditation, a deep flow of consciousness. So when you concentrate your energy inside, focused on the spine and that flow of energy, and you have that one pointed focus interiorized inside, then you can actually have a deep meditation. And a deep meditation meaning sitting in stillness and allowing it to unfold. I'm going to talk about my ideas about how to make meditation deeper, but that's what he's talking about. And then the last step is called samadhi. And samadhi, that's the ultimate goal. That's that Christ consciousness. That's the energy of enlightenment, it's called, and so on. And so in that samadhi state is that Christ consciousness portal to the experience of God consciousness. And that's what entails. So you got 8 different steps here. And so what I suggest is they're all important and begin to maybe take them on and do them in your life in little ways. Maybe take one particular thing on and work with it for a month and then work on something else and begin to bring that into your everyday experience. I studied positive psychologist. I'm a hypnotherapist and a spiritual life coach. And in my journeys, I love to learn new things. And I got a certificate in positive psychology. And they study how to remap the brain and how to make positive changes. And one of their handy little hacks that they talk about is that if you really want to make a permanent change, better to make a little change every day. So think about something you want to change and then think how you could do it 5% better, something that's you could really do. It's not so difficult. And do that consistently for 30 days. Then it kind of gets registered inside of you. Then go for another 5% and so on. So if you do these with these 8 things, then I think what you'll find is that you'll be able to begin to incorporate them and will enhance your experience of life. And if you begin to do it, it's a lofty task to say, well, I want to get into Christ consciousness. Well, Yogananda thinks you can do it in one lifetime, but you do it step by step, a little piece by a little piece. But while you do that, you begin to feel better. You begin to have glimpses of Christ consciousness. I've had many glimpses of that consciousness, and then that eggs me on. It's like, wow, I want to have more of that. And so then I want to meditate longer, more regularly, deeper, because it affords that beautiful experience. And then it becomes a little more natural for me. And so I begin to live my life a little better from that place. So I want to give you some simple tips about what I have found has helped me meditate more deeply so you can get a glimpse of Christ consciousness. So one of the simple things is you meditate on a daily basis. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 5 minutes, but every day. Every day you meditate. Better to meditate 5 minutes every day than for an hour once a week. You get much more out of it. You remap your brain. You begin to change something inside of you by the repetition of that daily thing. Another thing about meditation that's maybe not so easy, but you build up to it, is try to be completely still when you meditate. That means your body not moving around. Find a comfortable position. You don't certainly don't have to be in a yoga pose. I don't do that. My body hurts if I do that. My body's not limber enough for that. But I sit on a couch or a chair, a straight back kind of chair, and feet flat on the ground. You could do it lying down also if you like, or on a recliner. But find a comfortable position and see if you can be as still as possible. And that's one of the reasons the asanas, which I talked about earlier, they get your body really still, feeling good. Makes it easier to be still when you meditate. But I find that's really important for concentration and to deepen the experience. And focus your attention away from your outer senses into what's happening inside of you as best you can. Now, that's not always so easy to do. So, some of the things that I have found that have been helpful for me, because as you're meditating, your mind might begin to wander. And if you engage with those thoughts, then you're lost, then you're out of the interior place into an exterior place. So some of the things that I found are helpful for me is have a focus. So some meditations use a mantra, which is a saying or a word to have a focus. So there's a mantra that Yogananda introduced that I really love, and I say to myself all the time, or if I'm in meditation and I feel like I need to deepen it, I say it. And the mantra is, I'm submerged in eternal light. It permeates every particle of my being. I am living in that light. The divine spirit fills me within and without. And I might say that to myself 3 or 4 or 5 times as a way to get me really focused inside. And it has a really powerful energy to it. But there are other mantras that are just words, that are or sounds, and they can work again to bring you back in there. Another thing I find that's really helpful is to focus on a spiritual being that you love or you feel connected with. So if you're a devotee of Yogananda, they say, well, imagine an image of Yogananda and that'll keep you focused. Or if you like the angels, focus on Archangel Michael or Archangel Raphael, or focus on Buddha or Krishna or Saint Germain or someone you've read about or you felt really connected with, but that keeps you focused. It keeps you deeper into it. Another thing that I teach a lot of my clients who I work with and teach deeper meditation practices to is that once you attain that kind of deeper state, create a symbol in your mind or an image that reminds you of that feeling. And people come up with all kinds of things, a star, a sun, a flower, whatever pops in their mind. Maybe there's a color, maybe a particular word, but that becomes your anchor. So if you feel yourself drifting, um, you say that, you give yourself that image, you say that word, you see that color, and that keeps you focused. I find that's really a good thing to do. Another thing to do is to follow your bliss. And what I mean by that is as you go more and more into deeper meditations, you're going to begin to have blissful, peaceful, interesting experiences. One of the traps that I fell in was that I would have a meditation and it was a great meditation. I loved it. Next time I meditate, I try to duplicate it. I try to create the same thing. Never works, right? It becomes like just a memory of it. It doesn't have the life force to it. So what I do now is I sit in stillness and in fact, a mantra I have is I say to myself, stillness, ever new bliss, creating heaven on earth. Those words are meaningful to me. And when I say that, then I just sit in stillness and I wait for something to arise. And then I follow the energy of that. But it's new and different each time. So it's fresh. So following what emerges as you interiorize and go into a deep meditation. Another thing that I suggest that was helpful is over time, increase the amount of time you do meditate. So if you start out with 5 minutes a day, that's great. Maybe in a month, you want to up it to 10 minutes a day. Give it a try. And you slowly up and up and up it, right? Um, and it's a good idea to pick a particular time in the day that you meditate in. So you're always meditating around the same time. Your brain gets that in its head and it begins to make it easier to meditate because it knows it's meditation time, right? But if you keep increasing a little bit, after a year or so, it's no big deal. All of a sudden you're meditating for 30 minutes. That's a nice meditation, and you can build it to bigger than that. The other thing that I think that Yogananda talks about, which I have found really helpful, is once a week, do a longer meditation. Kind of challenge yourself with a longer meditation. So if you're doing 10 minutes a day, once a week, maybe do 20 minutes. See what that's like. If you're doing 30 minutes a day, you build up to that, maybe once a week, do an hour. Challenge yourself. I once did that when I was studying in Yogananda's group, and they had a 3 hour meditation. I'm like, 3 hours? That's crazy. Maybe I meditated up to an hour. 3 hours seemed ridiculous to me, but I challenged myself and I got in the habit of doing that once a week, and it's great. It's become, I look forward to it. It's maybe the favorite time of meditation I do. But it took time to build up to that. But if you increase it, a longer meditation once a week, that'll help move it stronger. The other thing that's really helpful is find a meditation group. Even if it's a Zoom group, I teach a meditation twice a month, first and third Mondays of the month. I teach a spiritual meditation. It's free. It's on Zoom. And it's great. In fact, just contact me and give me your email. I'm happy to put you on the list. But when you get a group of 10, 20 people meditating together and directed together, the power of all of those energies in sync together makes your meditation much stronger. And I belong to a spiritual school. I've been going to that spiritual school since 2006, and there's maybe 15, 20 people in that school. And when we meditate together with my teacher, who's an amazing energy, oh my goodness, the experiences I have there are just out of this world, way greater than experiences that I've had just on my own. So find a group to meditate in. So those are my thoughts and ideas about how to connect with Christ consciousness. There is a special meditation that I learned a long time ago from my teacher sent to me called um, How to Contact the Christ Unconditional Love. And it was a very nice meditation. It had guided meditation in the beginning and then silence at the end. And I suggest with people that are meditators, especially in the beginning or intermediate, guided meditations are really good because they keep you focused. But always try to have some silence at the end so you can sit in stillness. Anyway, I've been teaching this meditation for many years, and I'm going to do a follow-up podcast to this where I'm going to take everybody through that meditation. So if that appeals to you, then you can look forward to having that. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope it was helpful in expanding your spiritual horizons, uh, supporting your spiritual journey. Remember, everything is interconnected in this universe. So as you grow and expand, you're expanding the consciousness on the planet. So it's a win-win situation. Please look for ways to put the things had mentioned that you feel connected to into action. Put it into your life because it only becomes wisdom when you directly experience it and live it. Uh, if it's just intellectual knowing, it doesn't have a lot of power, and it's certainly not wisdom. You have to experience it to have wisdom. So throughout the year, I teach different spiritual classes that you're all welcome to join. I have that spiritual meditation I mentioned to you that I do twice a month. I have a spiritual newsletter to send out. So if any of that's of interest to you, then reach out to me and I'll put you on the email list and you'll be alerted of these things. My email address is michaelr@alternativechoices.org, michaelr@alternativechoices.org, and you can see it in the podcast notes below as well. And wishing you deep, deep meditations and getting glimpses of Christ consciousness. It'll knock your socks off.